So, hello everyone, and welcome to part two of Fraternising with the Enemy. I'm joined today by Irish and Leinster, which is the same thing apparently. Rugby Twitter darling, Jay Long. How you doing, Jay?
Hey Richie, how are you, man? How you keeping?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for coming on early in the morning before you've got to look after the kids later.
Oh,
Uh,
I just got off shift, so so it's all shorts and panic from the waist down at the moment. So
Brilliant. I got you on because, as people maybe heard before, I talked to AP about South Africa and their build up to the World Cup. From your perspective, a Leinster fan, an Ireland fan, before we get into Ireland, what do you think kind of went wrong for Leinster in the semi final with Munster?
you do me like that early. Yeah, yeah. It's I suppose really disappointing. I guess it's hard to get around that kind of feeling. I think I think we probably maybe it's partially the fans' fault as well, but I think Leinster build themselves up a bit too much. Maybe I think they probably need to start focusing on the league a bit more. Just start winning games, winning those knockout games, and it becomes a habit. I think probably not enough is said about that loss versus Munster the week before. Kind of just starts putting the doubt in the mind. Suddenly you're close to perfect season is now. Oh shit! If we lose next week, we got nothing. It suddenly starts building itself up and I mean, all respect to La Rochelle, they were fantastic. But it's hard to see how a team capable of that first 20 minutes in the final could collapse so completely in the second half without it being somewhat self-inflicted. So it's definitely something that we need to look at ourselves, I guess. Um, like the second half was a shambles. I can't even get through it again. I just give up. I just give up every time. But yeah, where it went wrong is really tough. I mean, I suppose I'd be on the big books if I could answer that well. I mean, I think we definitely have the personnel. I think we definitely have the coaching ticket now. I mean, Jack Nabber on the way in and Andy Goodman and stuff. I think it's really promising. But yeah, it seems to be just we can't put the rubber on the road there towards that kind of killer end of the season, which is strange because I think as you said, it's not an unfair dig that it's essentially the Ireland squad for the main part. I think it's technically over 50% or maybe 70% of the squad or something. But yeah, like they do seem to have that killer edge. They do seem to be able to kind of win the tough games. If I can throw a respondent dig back, I mean, if you look at that Scotland Six Nations game, like there was the first half an hour, the lads were dropping like flies, and they still kind of found a way. You had, Josh thrown into the line out. You had that sort of adaptability and kind of really, really strong, resilient, steely mindset. Doesn't seem to be there with Leinster when it really counts, which is kind of worrying in itself. But yeah, really looking forward to next season to see how the new coaching ticket might switch things up. I mean, sometimes you don't really need to go better. Sometimes you just need different. Just change something just to get out of that kind of that where we were, which is 2 years of gut punches. Ronan O'Gara inflicted gut punches. So yeah, we'll see. Here's hoping.
Does it sting a little bit more because it is Ronan O'Gara, of course, who's played for one of the other provinces?
Which
Uh,
one? Which one is it?
yeah,
which province was that? No, not really. I never really buy into the whole like province thing too seriously. It's always kind of just having a bit of crack. And in some ways, it's great that we have an former Irish player, former kind of prolific Irish player out there, kind of tripping the life fantastic in Europe. It's really promising that we do have that sort of talent, not only on the pitch but off. So it's something to be proud of, really. On the day, yes, the texts start coming in from the Munster lads and work and stuff like that. But no, it's all good natured and fair play to him. He's doing an incredible job. Like his the record from La Rochelle pre-Rog to after Rog is it's chalk and cheese, right? It's a really really strong rise. So fair play to him, more power to him.
I'm glad he's a successful coach because it means he no longer does punditry. which, well, as a Scottish fan, was never too complimentary. So, talking about the province system in Ireland, the way things work, you've got obviously your Leinster, your Munster, Connacht, and Ulster. Do you think that the way that's set up and the way that the IRFU buy into that gives an advantage to the Ireland men's team at the end of the day?
I think it's definitely a handy stepping stone in terms of fan buy-in, as opposed to kind of coming up with, like, Wales is a typical example, right, where they just drop lines and say, now you're part of, Scarlets or something. We were already those provinces to begin with for thousands of years. So there was already, and we also, like, rugby isn't even anywhere close to the biggest sport here. We have Gaelic games and hurling and stuff. So there's already interprovincial sort of a bit of argy-bargy already. So rugby in Ireland probably has a bit of a head up there than simply because, we need 4 teams. We have 4 provinces. It makes sense. So yeah, absolutely. I do think it helps. I think that's probably maybe diluting slightly with just players moving into provinces, which is absolutely, I think, is probably a good thing, to be honest. For a long time, it didn't seem to be happening as much as it should. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a short career for the guys. They should absolutely just go do what they can. I mean, look at Nick Carty for us, going back to Connacht, going to Munster, going back to us. Joey Carberry, I think, has been unlucky. Obviously injury wise, but for the season kind of that he was really blazing for Munster, he was close to unplayable. So I think, yeah, it does help. But I mean, I think it's there's probably more made about it from a fan point of view in a negative sense than positive fans really care about it, I think. Because I love all the provinces, like, I'm happy to see them all do well. I just want to see one do better than the rest. But no, yeah, I think it does. It's a good question. It's a really good question. I haven't really thought about it overly, but I suppose on top of other countries, yeah, it probably is a bit of a leg up in terms of kind of the natural rivalry of things, and just kind of fan loyalty, fan buy-in probably does help a lot. Yeah.
And Ireland obviously very successful at the moment. Six Nations champions. I think they're number 1 in the world. May have
go on.
One in the world. Andy Farrell at the helm. And an interesting point was made on Twitter the other day. I didn't necessarily agree with it myself. That was sort of suggesting that Andy Farrell's coaching isn't as good as everybody thinks it is. It's just he's lucky there's all this continuity coming from Leinster and the like into the Ireland team. Would you agree with that? I don't know if I do, but I just thought it was an interesting point.
No, I don't think I would. Simply because the Leinster dominated Ireland squad was pre-Andy, right? He certainly benefited from a lot of continuity from Joe's tenure. But I think he seems to be a really, really good coach. Maybe I'm probably not good enough, and none of us are really close enough to know the nitty gritty minutia of how he is in the room and stuff. But I mean, I think it's clear to see the atmosphere around camp is totally different under him. I mean, one of the things that I often kind of annoyed me about Ireland camp really pre-Andy was it was nearly like a funeral the whole time. There was no crack, which I know isn't all singing, all dancing, but I'm a big fan of a healthy mindset, and he seems to have brought that in a hell of a lot more. The guys seem to really feel more comfortable around him. And maybe that's that's not a diss at Joe. Like, I'm not saying he's a tyrant or anything like that, but obviously Andy has brought a bit more out. And I think actually AP on your pod kind of hit the nail on the head. We have a really, really good host of fantastic players, arguably in some cases the best in their position in the world. I mean, if you take Hugo Keenan, there's a discussion through there, but they probably are more than the sum of their parts on the pitch. I mean, you can't look at Leinster and make the joke and say, oh look, it's mainly the Ireland squad, and see Leinster not delivering, and on the other hand see Ireland delivering on the biggest stage. Well, not the biggest stage, but close to the biggest stage. And the difference there is, well, one of the differences is Andy. So I think some credit has to go there. But I mean, we see this all with Leo Cullen as well. I mean, people don't see what's going on behind closed doors, so they assume he couldn't possibly be doing something good. I would be of the opinion, just look at the results. Look at what he's done, and it's Ireland are going from strength to strength so far. Probably set myself up for a horrible soundbite of a of a thing now coming up to what we're coming up to. But yeah, I'm quietly, nervously confident that I think we're going to do something good.
Good. And I guess before we get into sort of players and where we see the games going and things, what would you think would represent success for Ireland in the World Cup? I mean, in the World Cup, famously, Ireland haven't got past the quarter-final stage yet, and that's I'm not doing that to take the mick.
That's fine. It's fine. It's a fact. It's a fact.
Yeah. What is the semi-final enough with this squad, or is this kind of golden patch where they really need to kick on and get to maybe the final for it to be a success?
If I've been thinking about this because I knew this one was coming, but like, it's a tough one, right? Because if it was the previous World Cup and the pools were different and the way things would lay were different, I would say this squad should be looking for better than a semi. But the pools are just so savage. They're just so, it's like that quarter is going to be so tough if we get there. The semi is going to be so tough. It's 3 or 4 massive 50-50 games back to back, where teams that you're lucky to beat on any day, and then the next week you have to beat another team that you have to be really lucky to beat. So it's a really, really grueling sort of path. But I'd love to see them get to the semi. Obviously, I'd love to see them win the thing. But if get that monkey off our back of a quarter, winning a quarter, I personally would be quite happy. Now, obviously, when we lose the semi, I'll go live on a desert island for a week or something. I'll just die on the inside partially. But I think the guys would. I think secretly to be the most successful Irish World Cup team wouldn't mean nothing to the guys. I think that'll be something to take home. Obviously, it'll hurt if we don't get there, but you have to look at the quality opposition too. And if you look at some of the games where we won, and the argument is going to be made, you beat all these guys in like in autumn friendlies. It's a different stage. Most of those games were, except for the New Zealand game, we're at home. Like we beat the Box at home, we beat France at home. We could potentially have France away in their host World Cup. It's a totally different question. So, if you look at the under-20s in the analogue, we beat the under-20s France squad in the Six Nations quite closely. So, and then you look at what happened in the final, the under-20s. Then it was night and day. So the same group of players can do different things in different geos, right? So, I'd personally be happy with a semi. Whether the guys would, I'm not sure. But if we went out honourably at the semi against a team that were really, really firing, I don't think anyone could really be too disappointed. Beyond usual fan bullhorse, right?
They'll pick one player that's at fault and all that sort of stuff. It's
madness. Like if Johnny had kicked those 3, the All Blacks wouldn't have scored those other 30 points.
Exactly. Speaking of Johnny Sexton, we might as well.
Let's go.
Obviously, we now know the outcome of the Johnny Sexton inquiry and trial by social media and all the rest. I think the ban is what it is. I didn't expect him to get banned into the World Cup. What do you make of Johnny's role as captain now, though? I don't think there's any point getting into the ban. We could be here forever and a day talking about whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah, but if I want to touch on it lightly, I think he's a very lucky boy. I think there's no denying that. I suppose the more worrying side of it is that the precedent has been set, right? The people are going to quote the Johnny Sexton fiasco now to justify a 3-week ban when both probably shouldn't have been. Look, and it wasn't really a 3-week ban, right? A 6-week ban with mitigation. We can get into the argy-bargy and stuff, but ultimately he's going to be there for the World Cup, and an awful lot of people probably think that he shouldn't have been at least fully there for the World Cup. But it is what it is. They seem to have gone through the decision process, like reading the report. It looks like they did. It was due diligence by all accounts. And I suppose the stuff that the social media were passing around as fact wasn't overly fact, which is a shock, right?
Yeah.
Look, it is what it is. And in terms of the captaincy, it is a worry, right? Because he's going to have a bit of he has a target on his back from a ref point of view now. But I'm not overly worried about that. Like, I mean, I think people who say, "Oh, he's going to be a target for the refs now," is an equal disservice to the refs. I mean, they're going to be professionals at the end of the day, and they're going to do their job. But he certainly needs to kind of keep his bib clean if he's going to. I'm expecting him to keep the captaincy. I can't see them taking it at this stage. I think we have natural other leaders there who could step in if Andy wants to do that. I wouldn't be overly sad to see a James Ryan or a Gary Ringrose or Pete O'Mahony or something like that step in. There's plenty of guys who've captained Ireland before, captained their province. Gary was mainly the Leinster captain for a large swath of this season anyway. So yeah, but I don't expect it to change. I'd say it's going to be Johnny, but he's certainly going to have to be less Johnny for large periods of time. But look, it's a tough one because he is obviously. I have a massive amount of time for Johnny sitting in the RDS. He's given me some great days, so it's tough to say. Yeah, he should definitely be stripped of the armband. He's a disgrace. I don't think that's the case at all. I think he got a bit carried away in the day. And look, by all accounts, he tried to apologise almost immediately. Now, whether it's that enough, that's arguable, right? I don't want to get back into that, but I mean, I think he can learn from his. He can take his licks and then learn and hopefully grow a bit and rep us better at the World Cup.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you're right. It does a disservice to the refs. In fact, the one person that seems to have been the least affected by all this is the man that was the target, Jaco Piper.
Yeah, he doesn't
played it down and thought it was all a laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think the refs are necessarily going to be quick to penalise him for silly things. Obviously, if he's in the ref's face, I mean, in much the same way as Jamie Ritchie got a 10-metre penalty for sort of chatting back to Luke Pearce. That's what happens in rugby. That should happen anyway. So there's that side of things there. Johnny Sexton, obviously, from my perspective, Johnny Sexton's very important to the Ireland team because I only ever remember Scotland winning against Ireland when Johnny Sexton wasn't there. And that's because he's never lost to Scotland, as far as I understand it. How important is he as a Jenga piece for Ireland?
Massively important. And it's like, well, no disrespect to the guys in behind, like the Jack Crowleys and the Ross Burns and stuff, and the Joeys of lore. But it's more how good Johnny is rather than how particularly bad anyone else is. He just drives the standard so well. And he doesn't have perfect games by any stretch, but he has really, really big moments. You know, when he needs us, it seems to be Johnny making a big hit, Johnny making a strip, you know, his famous Johnny choke tackle out of nowhere that sometimes you don't want to happen, but he does go for it anyway. And the guys kind of, I think, turn around and look at that, and one is his profile, two, his age, and three, you know, he doesn't have to do some of the stuff he does in the position that he is, but they see him go for it anyway. And I think it's hard for young lads to look at that and say, oh, you know, and not say, shit, I'm going to have to really dig in here and let's go. Instead of going quietly off into the night, which I think may have happened in say, the Champions Cup final. I think Johnny would have started ripping people apart 5-10 minutes into that second half and things may have been different. But yeah, he's massively important. Not only technically, he has a great read of the game, like his tactical kicking's really, really good. But he's just the right level of bastard for us, right? He just doesn't die. He doesn't want to die. He doesn't want to lose in any way, shape, or form, which is, in one side, probably previous to the conversation, part of the problem of what we've just went through. But on another side, when it's on the pitch, it's absolutely vital. If you just look at him, he's just angry all the time. He's he's just some sort of tactical Hulk that just gets better and better. And a lot of people say, "Oh, he's getting angry now," but you kind of want a little angry Johnny, you know. You just a small bit, and you want him simmering. And like, if you look at what he's done, like the way he moves lads around the pitch, the way he moves opposition around the pitch, I think we're seriously going to miss him when he's gone. And just hope that the guys see that and see it as a star to kind of guide to, rather than someone to just simply supplant. Be good to keep him around camp and the guys to learn from, because I think that's an awful lot of IP if he just goes off into the wind. after he's finished to lose, yeah, we'll see. He's massively, massively important. And obviously, I'm going to have a little cry when he's gone. It's a double whammy for me, for Leinster and Ireland. So it's going to be a big change.
Yeah. Now, obviously, you're a Leinster man and an Ireland man. From my perspective, and I don't know if you'll get this analogy, but I once compared Johnny Sexton to Tom Brady, and the fact that if he's on your team, you love him, but as an outside fan, you have to respect how good he is, but you kind of hate him because he's got this kind of attitude and swagger about him. Can you see that if you weren't a Leinster fan? You see why people don't like him?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, like I only have to look at, say, Owen Farrell for years to get the same thing. And by all accounts, it seems that's fairly unfair. He seems to be a nice, he seems to be a really nice bloke. But yeah, I totally get that. I mean, there's points where I've looked at, again, say Owen Farrell, or trying to think of some other good examples. Greg Laidlaw, just to give you a small slap in the face. You always knew how good he was, but he was always that admirable level of bastard, that you just wanted. That's what you want, right? I mean, you're not there to be your friend either, It's not all lovey-dovey, like. But yeah, I can absolutely see why people don't like Sexton. Absolutely.
Cool. So let's look at the Ireland forward pack. I think, again, put my Scotland fan hat on, they've always kind of bullied us. And I think the front row are always excellent. What do you think the key for Ireland's success in this World Cup is? Do you think it comes from the forwards or the front row and the set piece, or is it more open play? What would you say the key, particularly with the Springboks, who I presume most Irish fans are pretty confident about beating Scotland, but what about the Springboks game? How do you see that going as well?
Yeah, it's just like everything else. You kind of need both, right? I mean, we definitely need to get over the last couple of years, I suppose, where we really fell down is where we just got bullied. Like, I mean, there was a couple of England games where I was in the front row. You just see the lads just taking backward steps, right? Or Saracens, I should say, Saracens games. But same thing again, right? Yeah, like I think it'll be absolutely vital we get parity anyway, for sure, at scrum time, set piece. But I suppose the way the game is going, and I know it's a bit memeable and he gets a bad rep, but the likes of Andrew Porter, he's on the team for a reason. He does seem to give some scrum penalties. I think that's probably overestimated. Looking at the actual stats, it was probably slightly overestimated, but percentage-wise. But what he offers around the park seems to be more important to Andy. Like, it's kind of undeniable. The guy seems to score a try a game. At some stage, he will bury over. So I think parity is probably, in today's game, probably slightly more important than absolute scrum dominance. I mean, I think if we were able to meet the All Blacks up front, not the All Blacks, the Springboks, I should say, Springboks up front, not get bullied, and we could probably beat them out wide in certain cases. I think that's what we saw in the Aviva more than a couple of months ago. Aviva in the autumn, we cracked them open out wide a couple of times. They did the same to us. But I suppose, take into account what we saw this weekend, getting parity and then putting some really good bombs up might be a good option as well. And we have some good chasers. I mean, if you send some bombs up and send Hugo Keenan after them, put them under pressure, it'd be really interesting. But I suppose it's vital to have both, really, because the Boks, I think, again, it's overestimated how much they're just this big team. But I mean, if you look at like Colby, Courtly, Arnsa, and if you just assume that these guys are just going to bully you up front and you get the ball to those guys, it's game over. He's just going to like the guys will just get past you in a phone box, right? So it's not like they don't have absolutely electric backs as well. So it needs to be a good mix between both. And I think we probably do have a good mix of both. I suppose it's the depth that is the big question about Ireland, and probably still is to a certain extent. I think we're in a better place. I mean, if you look at the Six Nations, everyone was kind of in panic stations because kind of Finlay Bealham needed to start over Tadhg Furlong, but he did a fantastic job, right? He started against France, he did great, and then you had Killer coming on. So there is depth there. I think it's really, really important we keep. And I suppose one of the worries we have at the moment is Dermot Barron, the Munster hooker, has gone into camp. So there's a little question over who is the injury concern. So if that's an injury concern over Dan Sheehan or Ronan Kelleher, that would be a big concern. I think Dan Sheehan's a key player for us. It's fairly obvious he's probably one of the best hookers in the world at the moment, in nearly every aspect of the game. So keeping the key guys fit and getting parity, I think, is probably what's going to be key for us to make a good show. And I wouldn't be overly confident against Scotland. Against Scotland, and I think it's a strange one because I think you guys have the box right up, right? First match the box.
Yeah.
Like that.
Matches against Ireland. So
yeah. I'm going to that one. I'm going to that one. But I think we have a bit of a gentler run in. I think we have, can't remember now, is it Romania first, or I think it's Romania first. So we have Romania, Tonga, and then we're into the box. So I think that's probably going to make up for the fact that I think you guys have a bit of a better pre-World Cup set of games. You have Italy next week, France twice, and then Georgia, right?
Yeah, I seem to think that we have another game, but maybe I've made that up. I think there's a rest week or something weird in the middle of it all because there's weeks of games. But we've got quite a few games, and of course we don't have a talisman missing from any of those games as well, which means that we can run everybody out. But
yeah. So it's box first is tough. I'm kind of slightly happy that people are kind of unhappy that we'll have such big games stacked up, because we have the box a week off and then you guys, and then we'll be potentially, hopefully, straight into a quarterfinal. But I think that the two kind of it's disrespectful to say easier matches, but certainly the lower ranked teams, put it that way, up front, I think is a nice way to get eased into it. Let the guys hit their straps a little, and rotate and keep those big guys fit for box. So I think it's going to be really good. The worries I have, really, if I was to pick any, and it's strange, is that there's only one Hugo Keenan. I think that's a small worry there. I think we're probably a little too reliant on him, in that we have plenty of guys who can do a job at fullback, but at that stage I don't know if do a job is good enough. Hugo Keenan goes down, you're going to have maybe Jimmy O'Brien slotting back, and he, by all accounts, he's a fantastic player, but he's a fantastic player at finishing out 20 minutes, 30 minutes when Hugo goes down. Starting against the box, starting against the All Blacks or something like that is a totally different story, so that is one area of worry. And obviously, as I said, the extra people called in. So Andrew Conway, who probably needs no introduction, has been called into camp, and Dermot Barron from Munster. So we're kind of waiting slightly anxiously to see which hooker has taken a knock in training. A knock to Dan Sheehan, Ronan Kelleher, or any of the guys really, Tom Stewart and stuff. It would be pretty impactful for what was our assumed gloried final depth chart that we were so happy to see, and it's already starting to crumble. So
well, we all know that you could just put Cian Healy in there, right? And
anywhere.
Still get a job, get Josh Player thrown in. I think he lost one line out.
He was good. He was good.
I do think, looking back on that Scotland-Ireland game, though, it was a missed opportunity for Scotland in that when Josh van der Flier started throwing in, Scotland should have been chucking up a front pod.
What was going on?
They were trying to
front. That was amazing. I was just like, the lads are great. Do you think he's going to the tail? Well, what's happening?
Exactly. Just chucking a pod up. You've got Richie Gray, who arguably at the moment, and I know a lot of people sort of dissed me for my Lions squad. I had Richie Gray starting in it.
Your personal Lions squad that you apparently got wrong. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. But Richie Gray, this since he's come back into the Scotland setup, has been excellent, and been very good in the line out and making steals and stuff. Why is he not going up at the front against Josh van der Flier? Arguably, the only thing I would question that Josh van der Flier might not be 100% good at. So
I think it was like 3 or 4 lineups. It wasn't just one, right? It was a couple. It was a couple.
It was a lot. It was bad. It was bad. There was a lot of things in that game. There was one where, for some inexplicable reason, Duhan tried to step Hugo when he was a couple of meters from the line, and as good as Hugo Keenan is I think if he had ran straight at him because he was coming across, he would have probably went over him and slid into the
yeah.
line. And yeah, I was right behind the goal.
Hugo smashed him. Hugo smashed him at the touch, right? Yeah, I think. Yeah.
No, he brought him down, and then I think James Lowe or something got a jackal. So
Yes,
it was just a series of things that were just went terribly wrong for Scotland in that game, and went very well for Ireland. But you make your own luck, and that's what the Irish squad are very good at doing.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They didn't blink. It would have been very easy for them to just go into autopilot there and lose, right? But they kept on, and as I said, that's the kind of mindset thing that I think Andy has. That's the main thing he's given us is just that sort of fuck this. We're giving it a go either way, Yeah. So hopefully that stands for us.
So you've got obviously you've talked about the main games. Everyone sort of, I suppose, we all talk about Tonga being this easier game, but right now, obviously,
no. That's worrying. It's worrying.
whether they're basically sort of repackaged Australia squad slash All Black squad, look like they could do some damage as well. But who scares you the most on the Springboks team in terms of which player, if you could nick a Springbok and put them in the Ireland team, who would you take?
Oh, the obvious one. Like throw the cat on the pitch and say Jean Klein. No, no, it's just too good to not say, right? No, jeez, there's so many, right? I mean, you're looking at. I love Peter Steff. I don't think I think people would be mad not to say Peter Steff, right? But I mean, let's say, I suppose if what I just said. I would take Villy LaRue, right? I mean, sit on the bench with Hugo and swap and change, right? That'd be one, I guess. But Jesus, there's literally so many. Malcolm Marks he's absolute gold dust, right? Sia himself, hopefully he gets fit. We want to see Sia. I have to pick one. That's tough. See, I suppose what's tough there is that you kind of just like you feel like you're cheating on the island guy, then, right?
Yeah.
it's like well if I said Sia or something like that, I was like, well, what did Ryan Barr do to me? No, I don't know. Jesus, that's tough. Who would I steal? One name. I'd go Snyman. I'd probably go Snyman. I think there's nothing wrong with someone who's just that absolute just monster. Just last 20 half an hour of a game. Imagine him coming on and just running at you. It's just terrifying. I think I'd go Snyman.
Cool. And in terms of the Ireland squad, what's your sort of, if you thought about what your starting 15 would be? I mean, a lot of it picks itself. I'm presuming the front row would be Porter, Sheehan, and assuming everyone's fit, and Furlong. Yeah. I'm a Cian Healy apologist, so I would actually start Cian Healy over Porter. But I'm no
hassle with that. Two less.
I've been a bit of prop, so I prefer Cian Healy because.
More pure scrummager, as opposed to
some of the penalties Porter's wins should be penalties against him, in my opinion. But
not just yours, parents.
Second row, there's always been obviously Tagburn floats between the second row and the back row. Would you have him and Ryan as your second row, or?
Yeah, it's tough because I think it's horses for courses. I think say like Henderson probably offers a bit more bulk. Which may help against some of the bigger squads, but I think it's so hard not to have Tadhg in your team somewhere. He's an absolute freak, right? I mean, if you like towards the end of that New Zealand tour, there's like 10 minutes where Tadhg just said no and just made about 17 turnovers or something. It was hard to believe. Like, it's so hard to pick that and say, oh, you need bulk, and then you suddenly realise Tadhg isn't on the pitch. You have to kind of rethink your entire life, I think I'd probably go Ryan and Byrne with and then the back row, probably Doris, O'Mahony, and Van der Fleer. I think that'd probably be my choice. And you just live with it. I think you just have to live with it. Just hope we get the shove on, hope we get parity, and what the lads offer everywhere else is just. I mean, like, again, you make all these choices and people say Ryan Barr, and you suddenly realise you're down Peter O'Mahony, which for folks who look at off-ball stuff, like, Pete's just a dog. He just doesn't keep going. He's hitting rucks all the time. His work rate's through the roof. His leadership is fantastic. I think I'd go Byrne in the second row with Ryan. and to hell to pay on Twitter in the next 48 hours after I said it. But yeah, born in the second row, Ryan.
Do you think there's ever scope for Conan and Doris in the same back row with Doris moving over to 6? Or
yeah, I liked that for Leinster. That's what we kind of did for the last 3 rounds of Champions Cup, right? We had Doris at 6 with Conan at 8. I think it worked well. Again, it's very, very hard to leave Conan off a team. Especially this season. He's really I know reading some articles, he was kind of getting over some form of injury or sickness that was leaving him quite fatigued all the time. Which kind of explains some, I wouldn't say lapse in form, but certainly not as explosive high-end self that we've seen for his first couple of seasons. But yeah, Jesus, yeah, that was a nice setup. I just think that balance of with Van der Flair and Pete is very, very good. But I wouldn't be sad to see Conan start at 8 either. I just think it's what's working for us. Like that's what that's what kind of beat the All Blacks, what beat France. And you kind of just have to take that on the chin. It's very, very hard to break a winning setup, right? So
yeah. And then it's scrum half. I would argue possibly Ireland's maybe weakest position. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but I think Gibson Park's very good. I think Murray's obviously a legend and has done great things. But when you get beyond that, I think you've got Doak. I forget the little guy.
Casey.
Sorry?
Casey.
Yeah. I mean, I take it Gibson Park's sort of the nailed-on starter, but how do you view Ireland's depth at scrum half?
Yeah, that's a real tough one. I think my answer probably would have been different had you asked me this time last year. I probably would have nearly put the likes of Casey probably above Murray, simply because I think if you're going to offer something roughly equivalent, you might as well develop the new guy. But I think this year in particular, I think Murray's shown that he's more than capable. He's a very, very solid pair of hands. And he seems to just keep going again. I wouldn't say back to his top form because I think that's impossible. I mean, the age just changes people, right? I can tell you for sure that's what happens. But he seems to be playing great rugby again. And as I said, he couldn't get a more seasoned pair of hands, right? I mean, in some cases, you don't need ridiculous top-end sexy stuff. You just need a cool head knowing how to finish out a game. And I think that's what his capacity is going to be. So I think you're going to have Jembo starting, Jameson Gibson Park starting, with Murray on the bench for those kind of serious tooth and nail games, with Casey more than capable of starting games where we think that we won't be under as much pressure. But I would agree, it's probably not. It's probably one of the most unsettled positions in my head, in terms of certainly who's on the bench, and I think that's probably what your question's hinting at. I think it's obvious that Jembo is the main guy in. But who comes after that in the big games is the question, I think. But I wouldn't not back Casey to do a job either. Sometimes you need that kind of absolute dog of full of energy scrum half, which he adds, and I think that you can mix things up. You can catch people offside, not offside, off guard, potentially offside as well, I guess. But you catch people off guard with his kind of change of pace. He plays a different game than anyone in Ireland, I think. But yeah, we'll see. I think definitely Jembo to start and probably Murray on the bench for the big games.
And I've got to ask, as a Scotland fan, we've obviously had all this. Do you think Scotland have done the right thing not calling John Cooney into the squad? Because I think if he's that low down the Irish pecking order, I think Scotland have got slightly better scrum halves. It might be the one area where we kind of could argue, if it was a full 15, that arguably Ben White would be ahead of maybe the Irish scrum halves. Do you think we've done the right thing saying, no, we're not going to bring in a 30-odd-year-old scrum half as a mercenary for a World Cup, and we're going to stick with what we've got?
Well, it's hard to know. I suppose Wright has different answers there, right? I mean, if you're looking for future development, then yeah, absolutely right to pick the guy who you're going to have for the next eventually 10 years, right? And you are right. White is fantastic. He's a great talent. But I've seen John Cooney do some pretty incredible stuff. I think something like that would add value more than what he gives you on the pitch. I think the guys could have learned an awful lot from him. And he has a kicking game, right? I mean, he can slot points from anywhere. So that's a tough one, right? It's really, really hard to say what's right or wrong in that scenario. I feel personally sorry for him. I think he's played more than well enough to be in green for a long, long time. That's one of the most inexplicable ones. I suppose him and Jack Carty are the guys who probably over the last, say, 5-10 years have probably asked themselves, like, Jesus, what more could I have done here to have gotten in? Like, there was one season where I think John Cooney got European Player of the Year, or was at least, was it? I'm not sure, but he was unbelievable. He was unstoppable. Like, he was literally unplayable. So I like was nearly forced down the team sheet at 9 for me, and then Six Nations time coming around, got absolutely no love again. So it's crazy. I suppose that's one of the crueler parts about the game. Sometimes you just don't work or whatever, or the coaches don't think you'll work regardless of what would have happened in reality had you got the shout. So, I would have loved to see him. Like, I'm really happy for Ben making his way over to us. I don't know how you feel about that, but it would have been lovely, a nice story for John personally to because I like John from his Leinster days and his Connacht days as well. So I've been looking at him for a long time, doing really, really well for everybody. And just being a really, really genuine guy. Seems to be a really nice person. So you just want to see nice people do well. It would have been a nice little story for him towards the end of his career to get that shout. But if it works for Scotland, that's what you guys have to do. So
yeah. And then you mentioned Ben. Well, going on to 10, Sexton's your nailed on starter if he's fit and available. Behind him, there's a lot of shouts for Jack Crowley now. I think Ross Byrne has been having that mantle. Obviously, I don't think Billy Burns is in the squad anymore, probably for good reason. Sorry, that's a bit shady. Who do you have on the bench for 10? Because I don't suppose there's much debate about Johnny Sexton starting at 10 in this World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those two. I think the other person in the squad for fly half is Crowley, which I just don't think he spent enough time at 10 to justify a shout out on that level of stage. You know, if it was Leinster and it was just a random kind of mid-league game where you had a fantastic pack and he'll have a bit of an armchair ride to a certain extent, yeah, throw Frawley into 10, that's fine. And if they did that for a couple of years and he was well seasoned in the position, I'd say why not try him on the bench for a game. But I think it's really between Crowley and Byrne. I suppose it's really, really tight between them at the moment. I suppose you would say that Byrne has been exposed to probably a higher standard of opposition in terms of he's been there and thereabouts, Champions Cup finals and stuff for a long time. But arguably, you would say that he hasn't won any of them. So that's you can't get around that. And if you look at Jack Crowley, the ball's the size of small planets to do a drop goal in the Aviva in front of a pretty rowdy set of Leinster fans. Like, there's something to be said for that. He's had a fantastic season. He's shown that he has a nice steely nerve. I like the look of him. I think he's a lovely player. So it's really what Andy values more. I think Ross probably has the better boot in terms of conversions and penalties. But other than that, I think Jack probably is a better man on the ball. So I'd be happy to see either of them. But I have a feeling that it almost should probably be Jack at this point.
Oh, cool. You mentioned Ben Healy there. I remember watching him in a random, well, it wouldn't have been URC then, it was pro, whatever it was, playing against, I think it was Edinburgh, it might have been Glasgow, and the commentators mentioned that his granny was for Scotland or something like that, and I was like, we need to get him in now, because I know we're trying the Blair Kinghorn project in Scotland, but, you know, behind Finn Russell, there's not a lot there for Scotland, and that's definitely Scotland's weakest position. I think Ben Healy brings a real tool to that he's got the ability to attack, but he's also got a great boot and a great tactical game that he's picked up from Munster. So yeah, I'm really pleased we got Ben Healy. Actually, that's exactly what I wanted 2-3 years ago. So yeah, I'm quite pleased.
Yeah, I think that's a smart little opposition, because I actually really like Ben, and I actually remember, really bizarrely, I must go find it so I can insult whoever I was talking to about it. But there's a conversation on Twitter where I was defending Ben to Munster fans, at some stage. I was like, I like Ben. And they were just like, oh no. I was, all right, fair enough.
Was that
But
after he missed the kick in that cruel penalty shootout they had with Toulouse by any chance? Because I remember.
no, it was before that. I felt really bad for that. That was such a shit way to end the game, right? But
very harsh.
just flip a coin or something for fuck's sake. But
Yeah.
yeah, like I'm really happy for him, and not only that, he definitely looked fantastic after making his debut for you guys. Like he looked fantastic anyway, but you can see that that extra bit of swagger that a 10 needs has certainly had to been kind of amplified in him or whatever. So I think he's going to go really well. I think I have a horrible feeling that he's going to slot a penalty and win that last pool game full circle.
Yeah, I think that would be the ultimate FU for never getting a look in with Ireland's senior squad. And speaking about, we mentioned John Cooney before. Just one other name that always kind of sprung to mind with me, and I appreciate he might not be around this World Cup, but do you ever think that Madigan was kind of a bit of a lost talent to Irish rugby, in the sense that he's very talented across the backline. He can play in different positions. He's got this great boot on him. I mean, he came on and ruined Edinburgh's quarter final, one of Edinburgh's quarter or semi-finals and stuff like that. He's very, very, very calm, cool head. Do you think he's a lost soul?
Yeah. I never knew what kind of understood, because the star kind of waned, right? Because there was that World Cup. Jesus, what was it, 3 World Cups ago now? I don't know. And Johnny got injured, and he came on, and I thought he played really well. He didn't really put much wrong, a foot wrong, which is, there's a lot to be said for that on that side of kind of size of stage, right? And then a star kind of just waned, and I agree. Because obviously as an Leinster fan, I love Madigan. He's fantastic. I loved him for a long time. But yeah, I'm not. Geez, it's a good question, because I'm not sure what was the kind of breaking point, because he was kind of the obvious heir apparent for a while, and then kind of Paddy Jackson kind of came in and around that conversation as well. Less said about that, the better. But and then he just went off. Really, really strange. He spent his time in Bristol, which again he was doing really well for Bristol, and then that young lad, that Welsh young lad, was a Ewan Evans, came in or something. Can't remember his name. But yeah, he seems to be the kind of bridesmaid of wherever he is, which is really strange, because he, as you said, he was fantastic in that. Was it the URC semi-final? Was it semi-final, quarter-final, semi-final?
I think it was a semi-final. It was when they had that weird kind of COVID interrupted one where everybody ended up playing derbies after the.
Yeah. Because he trained. I think he trained like 2 absolutely insane penalties to win, didn't he? Or something. Yeah, it's a great question, because I'm not sure what. Now it'll come to me. Maybe he was injured or something like that, but I can't draw to mind what kind of spun him out of the Ireland setup. But he's kind of another white buffalo that got away to a certain extent. Yeah.
I suppose it's a good problem to have these people that get away, and then ultimately you're still successful. So it must mean that they're doing something pretty.
Yeah, true. Yeah. If only we had a Madigan, we'd be number 0 in the world.
Centres, for me, Ireland centres have always been Henshaw and Ringrose, but I know that there's an argument for Bundyaki and Henshaw and other combinations. Is that your combination? Who would you go with the centres for Ireland?
Yeah, I think Ringrose for sure, absolutely for sure, and up to a certain, like up to Lingy last year, I would have definitely said Ringrose and Henshaw. But Bundy has just been so good too. I mean, he's just made some fantastic impacts, and I think there's a place for both. To be honest, I think Ringrose can go for miles. He's an absolute Rolls Royce. Henshaw's injury profile is a bit worrying, so I wouldn't be overly sad or upset to see kind of those 2 guys sharing the load to a certain extent. I really like Bundy coming off the bench in the last half hour, and just running that tired lads, because he's a unit, absolute unit. Excuse me. Who starts? Yeah, I agree. I think it's still Henshaw. I think he's pound for pound when he's good. I think he's one of the best centres in the world, and he just keeps smashing lads. He's just so aggressive, and he has a great engine. So yeah, Ringrose and Henshaw for me.
Okay. And then the back 3, I think we're both on the Hugo Keenan is in God mode kind of
yeah
here. I mean, I actually thought Hugo Keenan was wrongfully snubbed by the Lions in 2021 because he was shown early that he was good. A lot of people still overlook him for like Freddie Stewart and stuff like that. And if I was to steal an Irish player, I'd steal Hugo Keenan, particularly with Stuart Hogg retiring. I think he's nailed on as a starter, and I think James Lowe is probably nailed on as on one of the other wings. But the other wing's a bit more open. You've got Mac Hansen, who's done a good job. In fact, after the Scottish Rugby podcast that I listened to prior to the Ireland-Scotland game, basically saying he was the worst player that was on that park. He ended up, showing Scotland up. So is Matt Hansen the other winger, or you've also got Lammer, you've got Stockdale, Keith Earls are still kicking about. I think you've got a pretty good set of wingers there. So who would you have as the third winger, I guess, or the third back?
It's Mac. It's Mac all day for me. I think Mac is almost as nailed on as Lowe now. Because he's shown so much more of his game in the last year. Like, he was always electric. He always had the pace, and he was always had those kind of highlight reel runs and breaking lads' necks on the way by. But he's been making turnovers and everything the last year. Like, especially I think it was against you guys, I think maybe against South Africa and stuff like that. Just absolutely insane. Like, shouldn't be able to do that at your size turnovers. That's shown that he's really dug in. It means a lot to him. He wants to win. He's totally bought in. I think Mac is as nailed on as Lowe is on the other wing. And then I think maybe the guy who's on the bench floating would probably be maybe your Jimmy O'Brien, simply because he offers so much in so many positions. I think probably you're talking Lowe, Mac, and Jimmy are probably the main three. And then you obviously have Earlsy, who can, he's rock solid. Probably lost a half step, but he's still fantastic. And I think, I think it's Mac and James anyway for the big games for me. And it seems to be the case. Like, I did a small bit of research because yesterday, and I looked at, and the two of them have been pretty much there was not that much experimentation there through the Six Nations. It was pretty much Mac and James Lowe throughout. And again, you can't really argue with the results, right? So
yeah. And then I'm going to ask you this question about the Scotland team. If you had to take one Scotland player and
Doohan. I still Doohan.
fair play.
No, you need him, and simply because we can then say we stole another South African as well. It's memeable. No, but there's a couple of players. As I said, Ben White is a tasty player. I think second row, Jamie, as you said here. I'm also a Richie Gray fan. You'll be happy to know. I think he offers a lot. He's a big man. He's a big unit. Pierre Schumann, you can never say no to a player of that quality as well. But for me, I think Doohan, just for the ridiculousness of it. But you have, the whole Hua Pilatu combination in the middle. Like, he's have some tasty players. I think he's the type of team that probably just need to make that one win. Just need to make those one or two wins that he's more than capable of. But it seems to be much like kind of Munster for a couple of years, kind of winning and losing as a habit. I don't think that much needs to change. You just need to get those rubs of the green once or twice, and then you kind of get a taste of it, and you start winning those games more than often you do as well. You said at the start that you'd be confident. I think we'd just be as confident as probably you would to be beating us as well. Anything can happen over in those pitches in France, right? So, but for me, I just love Doohan. I just love seeing him run. I just love seeing him run. He'd be a nice man to see in green.
Yeah. Weirdly, going into the World Cup, I feel more confident that we could have a chance to beat South Africa than Ireland. Not on the basis that I think South Africa are way weaker than Ireland, but just on the basis that I think mentally Scotland, there's something about a Johnny Sexton-led Ireland that Scotland can't seem to get their head round. Now, whether with Hogg retiring and some new voices like taking over those, his voice, maybe that changes things. But I just think that's always been the sort of our bogey team is Ireland. No matter how badly Ireland play, they always find a way to beat us when Johnny Sexton's at the helm. And I think that's why I think that if we're going to get through the group, it's going to take us beating South Africa to do it. That's
Yeah, I think we probably swing between. I think our success has really been that maybe we don't have the incredible highs that like that 20 minutes we just seen from the All Blacks, which everyone is terrified of seeing this weekend. But I think if you want to put it as a scale of like 0 to 100, I think we swing from 70 to 90. We like we have a pretty high floor for a performance, so we never totally collapse. And that's hard to beat. Whereas other teams can swing from 50 to 100. Like when they're really good, they're unbeatable. But when they're really bad, and we've just seen that with the All Blacks, they just had two pretty messy years, followed up by one of the best 20 minutes of rugby we've seen in a long time. But whereas Ireland don't seem to collapse that far, and when they do, you have Johnny to pull them up by the bootstraps to get them up to that 70, 80, 85% where we need to be to get over the line. But yeah, I totally understand why you would back yourself, why you'd think the box would be, easier is a weird way of putting it, because that's not the case at all. But you can see they can be got at, and it's probably more off their own mistakes and back than any sort of weakness in their team. I mean, and I think people probably are reading a little too much into the loss the weekend. They had a very strong 60 minutes after that first 20, and they dragged it back to within eight points, I think, at one stage. After not an awful lot of people would have clawed the All Blacks back after going the guts of 20-0 down. I think they're a bit of a sleep. Is it wrong to say a sleeping giant when they're the world champs? Probably not. Probably doesn't make any sense. But yeah, they're terrifying, right? I mean, and Scotland are too, and Tonga to a certain extent. I think we're sleeping on Tonga. Everyone's lists that they made on Twitter where they picked, a surprise team covered up. Nobody said Tonga in a sort of group collective hope. Please, Jesus, don't let them find form.
Yeah, I think that's why I said Fiji. It was more just I didn't want to tempt fate by saying
Yes.
Although it would be very insanely sort of Scottish and I guess Irish to an extent with the way that World Cups kind of tend to go for Ireland. If it was Tonga and South Africa that got out of the group, and then Scotland didn't even qualify for the next World Cup. Yeah, I think Tonga are not to be overlooked. I'm actually going to that game in Nice.
That's going to be fun. That's going to be so fun.
It could be important just for our World Cup in 2027, let alone the actual tournament. So, so who do you see winning the World Cup out of all the teams that are in it? I mean, I think France are the obvious favourite, but France have all been the obvious favourite, I think, in other World Cups and kind of flattered to deceive. So, who do you think is going to win this World Cup, and who do you think the final is going to be?
Like, if you ask me flat out, I would probably still just say the gut says France. I think this is a different France now. I mean, we're still all using the kind of memeable, which France is going to turn up. But when you go and look at what their win stats have been in the last 2 years, I think they've lost 2 games or something like that, or something. I can't remember the exact thing. Really, really strong. So it doesn't seem to be that level of inconsistency. Now they can show up and have a bit of a rocky game. Like, they weren't great against their first game in Italy. I think against Italy in the Six Nations, they were there and thereabouts. Italy dragged them close, but I think it is a different breed of France we're seeing, which is kind of terrifying. But if you force me to look out past them, I think if you look at the All Blacks, both what they seem to be building and their side of the draw, getting out of their pool and stuff like that, I think I'd probably say either France or All Blacks. Okay. Unfortunately.
That's fair enough. And apart from Ireland, and we mentioned sort of surprise teams and things like that, what team are you looking the most forward to seeing, and why? Apart from Ireland or Scotland,
Yeah, I mean, I have various motivations. I want to see what Eddie does to Australia. I don't. It's just purely academic at this point. I think nearly purely for the post-match interviews at this stage. Although I think people are sick of talking about him, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how much he can get done. Argentina, I'm looking forward to watching. I really enjoyed their game the weekend. I really like what they do. I think Michael Check is going to have them pouring. I'm not. I would have said Japan. I've been in love with Japan for the last couple of years, but they seem to have kind of fallen off a cliff. They're since the last World Cup, they really have. So I'm hoping to see them. Hoping to see them do a bit of resurgence and kind of keep the trend going and do England in the pools. Fingers crossed. But yeah, it's a good question. Who are you looking forward to see?
I think I always look forward to see Fiji, just because of the way they play rugby, and it's always exciting. I know that there's other Pacific Island teams that are excited, and we've talked about Tonga and how dangerous they could be. But I just think the way that Fiji seem to play rugby seems to be a bit more open and loose and fun. And I'm quite looking forward to. I know they'll probably get beaten every game, but I'm quite looking forward to seeing how Chile do. First time qualifiers. I quite like that. I think it was Germany that in 2019 that almost made it, and I was rooting for them. You like to see what the new teams can do. Yeah, I'd like to see how Chile get on. I can't remember who they've got. They've got obviously another team in their group that they could come up against and maybe get some joy out of. So
I mean, they can pull something special together. What was it? Uruguay did Fiji the last World Cup, right? Which was the kind of incredible one. That was a great game. But yeah, it's a great show. They're in Fiji for fun, and then hopefully Chile do damage to someone other than. No, Chile. That's a great show. Chile, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when they played Scotland A, because Scotland went on that tour of Argentina last year, and they played Chile with Scotland A, which I actually think was a bit of a cheat to Chile. They should, they were a World Cup qualifier by then. They should just play to Scotland. But and then they played Argentina. For good chunks of the game, Chile and Scotland it was a real back and forth, and it wasn't till towards the end of the game where maybe that lack of sort of professional fitness training kind of kicked in, and you saw a couple of quick tries at the end of the game which just put them away. But I think they could make a good account of themselves, particularly against some of the teams that are maybe not quite as well thought of in the tournament as well. I can't remember who's in the group though, or I would say them, but
it's great for them though, right? I mean, it's kind of what the whole thing's about. We kind of talk about the winners all the time, but these lads are just delighted to be there. It's great to see.
Yeah, one of the things I appreciate is professional rugby, so they get too many games and all this stuff. But one of the ideas I've always been toying about is whether or not we should have, if we're going to have, they're talking about expanding the World Cup to having 24 teams and stuff like that. Do you think they should have like a World Cup and then maybe like a World Plate and then a World Bowl or something like that? So that these teams, I appreciate they turn up and they get a chance to play like the All Blacks, and it's amazing because you get them to play the All Blacks. But do you think these teams would benefit from maybe having something to play for? And I suppose it's all money for them, but
no, I suppose it's money for them. It's players in the shop window. And I know we're saying, I think I'll be poached, great, but I mean that's how you gain experience and bring it back to a national squad, right? I mean, I think it was AP in your last pod said that, everyone's talking about Colby and how they need to get Colby back into South Africa, but the Colby that went and played rugby in different countries wasn't the Colby that came back and won the World Cup, right? So it would be mutually beneficial to get more players in the shop window, get them out into more professional setups, play with these big names, bring that IP back into the country again, and it's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy then, right? The quality increases, the expectation increases. I think that's a great idea. And not only that, they're great games, right? I mean, really, a good game of rugby isn't always necessarily the most incredibly well skilled. That's not to say these guys aren't, but a tight game of rugby is always infinitely better to watch, and comparably rated teams is going to be a great product, regardless of if it's Chile playing Uruguay or all these sort of teams. And they're great games. It's a great product. Everyone loves watching them. It's not like you're watching them and saying, bless, it's good, exciting, high quality rugby. It's guys in the shop window. It's money in the RU coffers. It's win-win. It's a great idea. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I mean, and you mentioned that I famously played one game at 10 in my career for Forrester second 15. And that finished, I think it was 36-34 was the final score.
Nice.
With the conversion to make it a draw, and it was like I guess I was playing in it, so I don't really know, but from what people that were watching it said, that it's like that was quite exciting because you didn't know how that was going to end.
Yeah, like ultimately that's the key. The drama is what people watch it for. Like, like my dad, he wouldn't be the biggest rugby fan, but like he literally can't watch when the All Blacks do 40 on someone. He just turns it off. Like, it's great, and he knows that they're incredible. But people don't want to see it. Right? That's not what you're going to crack the can of beer open for on a Friday night and sit down and enjoy. So getting comparably skilled teams into a competition would be, yeah, that's really nice. I like the sound of that. And even the Sanzar under-20s, I think so. I can't remember who tweeted. It might be in Tala for Rugby Bits or something, but that he should have probably opened it up a bit wider and got some of the more other developing teams in. It would have been a really good thing to see.
Yeah. I know that you've got like a hard out in a couple of minutes, so
yeah. I'm back on shift.
That's why we moved this recording forward half an hour, and I'm glad we did, because you'd have already been out. But thanks so much for your time. Maybe have you on again.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Maybe after Scotland have knocked Ireland out of the World Cup, we'll have a chat. That's rather punchy. But thanks so much for your time this morning and taking the time to do this. It's been great to chat to you. Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to, and then you can kind of bully them into listening to it?
No one from Twitter in particular. No. Look, I mean, thanks very much for having me. The only reason I'm here is because we got chatting online. It's been a pleasure. Real honor to be invited on. And sorry I missed the pod with AP. He sounds like a gentleman. So hopefully again we catch up some other time.
Yeah, well, it's worked out quite well, because I think we'd have probably had about a 4-hour pod if the two together. So it's worked out pretty well. And as I say, it's good. A Twitter story, people talking on Twitter and not actually engaging in vitriol. It's a win-win.
It is a win-win.
So thanks so much, and I hope you enjoy the World Cup. Just not as much as I do. That's
fair enough. Listen, thanks very much, man. Take it easy.
Cheers. Thank you.